Hello, my name is Sierra Coberstein, and this is a progress check for my systems development project for fall 2025. The goal of my project is to create a central online hub for the town of Patoka, Indiana, where ordinances and meeting minutes can be stored and accessed easily by Patoka's residents. Throughout this presentation, I'll walk through each of the 6 core processes of the system development cycle, highlighting how I'm progressing with each step. Day 0 is basically setting the stage, identifying the problem, and securing approval. I have identified the problem. Patoka, Indiana has no modern online presence for its ordinance and meeting minutes. To move forward, I outline the issue and the solution proposal in my system vision document, which I've linked here. I've also gotten project approval from my instructor, which basically checks off core process 1. Next up is planning and monitoring. This is where I broke the system into 2 main subsystems, the Ordinance Archive and the Meeting and Minutes Archive. I'll build the Ordinance Archive first, then the Meeting Archive in the second iteration. I'll be handling the majority of project tasks myself, with the exception of user acceptance testing, which I will recruit some friends to help with from different devices when that time comes. Deliverables for this phase include the work breakdown structure, which I have linked a very rough draft of here. Also the work sequence diagram. Once finalized, I'll use the work breakdown structure to complete the work sequence diagram, mapping out the project tasks step by step. These will be used as a guide to ensure deliverables are ready on time and the project stays on track. Day 2 is where I dig into how things actually work for the town. I created a questionnaire to understand current workflows, who's responsible for maintaining ordinance and minutes, how documents are stored now, and things of that nature. I sent a questionnaire to the town clerk and I linked her responses here. I've also visited numerous other town ordinance pages and bookmarked and documented features that I liked as part of preliminary fact-finding task. With that information, I will create a initial use case list, actions like searching, viewing, uploading, deleting, and downloading ordinances, plus filtering by year or category. Then I will map out the domain classes, such as ordinance, category, ordinance version, and tag. These are not extensive lists at this point, I'm still working on them. The use case list and the domain class list will serve as the backbone of the data model. Day 3 wraps up core process 3, discovering and understanding details, or the what, and begins core process 4, designing system components, or the how. So after some more in-depth fact-finding, I'll finalize the use cases and create use case descriptions. I'll then make a detailed workflow diagram for each use case. I'll also start visualizing and defining the user experience with screen layouts and reports. I've left a very rough draft of a screen layout here that sort of shows what I have in mind. Day 4, I'll really get into designing the system, starting with the database schema, which basically acts as a blueprint for the system. I'll create a database design document which will explain the database structure, including tables, fields, relationships, and constraints, to explain how the data is stored and accessed. The software architectural diagram will give a visual of the system structure. The design class diagram will outline the system classes, their attributes, methods, and relationships, and the subsystem architecture diagram will break the system into smaller functional parts and illustrate how these subsystems communicate and depend on each other. Once the design is solid, we move on to day 5, where things actually start coming to life, the build, test, and integrate phase. At this point, I'll start developing the system components for the first iteration. This is a step in which I actually begin code writing. I'll also be testing as I go. Once the system is functional, I'll move on to user acceptance testing. The main goal of this phase is to make sure everything works, not just technically, but practically. And finally, day 6, deployment. Before deployment can happen, I'll need to perform several tests on the system, both developer testing and user acceptance testing. I'll create a flowchart to visualize the testing cycle, as well as written test scripts and documentation of the test results. Once all tests are passing, I'm ready for deployment. For this project, deployment means setting up a functional demo site where the clerk and residents of Patoka can explore the Ordinance Archive. After deployment, I'll collect feedback to identify any usability issues or improvement ideas for future updates. And that will complete the system development cycle for the first iteration of the project. I will then be ready to start the second iteration, adding more functionality to the site.